Hi everyone, we are back for another Sewing Thursday. Today I'm going to start a whole series on pockets and we begin with a patch pocket. I'm going to make this very easy. We're starting with the really easy patch pockets which went on this lovely Natalie dress, and we're going to finish with a piped and bound pocket at the end, and then at the very end we're going to do a manly pocket. So how to do it on a man's shirt when you have got a curve at the lower end of the pocket, which needs a little trick, and I'm going to show you exactly how that works. So let's get right down to it and have a look at the pockets we're going to do today. And we're kicking it off with our first patch pocket, which is in the shape of a heart, and I put it on a dress, but you could also put it on a pair of shorts. And then we swiftly move on to what I call my Megan pockets, which have a fold over at the top. Again, they're fully lined. And then we're going to step it up again, and we're going to do bound edges and elasticated top on this pocket. And then the same method, but this time we're going to pipe all the way around the edge and we're going to bind the top. Then we're moving on to the shirt pockets. Here it's for a girl, so it's fully lined. And then the final pocket is the pocket for a boy, which is not going to be lined, and it's got just a mock line going across the chest. So let's see how that is done. Let's begin with the one with the hearts. So all you need is the lining heart and the shell heart, and then with the right sides facing each other, we're going to sew all the way around, and we're leaving a turning gap, and you should always leave the turning gap where it's the straightest, so it's easy to do. Now I'm going to just sew around, and whenever you have a pattern like that, you don't need a centimetre seam allowance. I'm using the first line there on my presser foot. You can see it on the right hand side, and I just keep moving around. I also would suggest that you do a smaller stitch length, because then it can fray less, especially when you do round things like a heart. That's really important. Next, you're going to cut back the seam allowances, and then also if you have a hard shape, there's a tip there, and we need to cut right to the seam, and then the furthest point we're grabbing with our fingers and pulling that through. Then it's going to be ironed, and we're top stitching just where the hand is going in. And I'm using something called a triple stitch. You can find that on your sewing machine. It's the one with the 3 dashes next to each other. It's a stitch that goes forwards, backwards, forwards. So it makes the stitch much more structural, it's much thicker, and looks almost like embroidery thread. Always have the needle down when you turn, and then just do the top edge of your heart. Now we're going to position the heart on the skirt. So when you found the right position for your heart, put one of them onto the skirt front, then take the other one, place it face down, and then fold over your skirt. And now I'm pinning through the layer just that top pocket, and that way obviously it's in the perfect position for what you need, which I think is such a nifty little trick, and I use it all the time. Then we're going to reverse stitch a little bit as well, and then go all the way around from the bit at the top, which we've already done, and that way it looks as if you've sewn all the way around, but actually you haven't. You've just done the outside, and we've done the bit where the hand goes in before, and then we've got a lovely pocket. This is a very, very simple pocket to do, and I think it's quite effective. You can also put a button on where the center of the heart is. Now we're going to move on to the Megan pockets. They are again lined, but this time we have something else on the top which we fold down. So here it's very important that from the contrast side you stitch all the way around the edge first, and then you stitch it on, and you make sure that you catch the flap as well, because otherwise it'll always come up. You could also put a button on it to hold it down, but it's much nicer like this. We've tried this in my sewing courses and this really worked the best. So go all the way up, and there's the Megan pocket. Now we want to do the pocket with the binding on the side and the elastic in the top. So I've just extended my round pocket off to the top, so I've got a straight edge. And then the width of the elastic, of course, is important here. It needs to fit in. But anyway, I turn it in and turn it in again, so I've got that width. And then I top stitch it all the way across, really close to the edge. Then I thread the elastic through. And don't be tempted here to cut it off the moment you get through the other side. Pull it all the way. So you've got some hanging both sides, then pull from both sides so that the elastic is evenly spread. And now do 2 lines of stitching next to each other. That is so important, because believe you me, that elastic will slip out. It's happened to me. Then cut the elastic back. Now we're going to use some bias binding that you can buy in the shop, or you can make your own using my bias binding videos. And we're going to leave a little bit standing over the edge, and the bit where the bias binding is slimmer we're going to stitch on first, so making sure that it catches underneath. And I'm going all the way around. Again, if you're lifting the presser foot, make sure that the needle is down and so really close to the edge. Now I'm going to cut those bias binding bits back. You could put a button there as well. Position your pocket the same way as before and then pin it. And this time we're going to stitch all the way around the outside. So you do the same again with the positioning. You put the right side down, then you fold over the skirt, pin it, and bam, done. So when you sew this down now, you start coming up from the lower line of your elastic, your tunnel, basically, sorry. And then you go down the other side, and that makes it A, secure, and B, it looks really nice. And all the way around, almost looks like you used a twin needle when you haven't. And here we do the same again, needle down, turn, and there we go, and go down. And that's that pocket. So the next pocket is the one we're piping for a coat. So I've got my piping cord, which is a curtain cord, which I like to use, and I've got my bias binding. And I'm inserting my piping cord into the bias binding. I'm using a special piping foot here, and I'm moving the needle over, not all the way so it's close next to the piping, but about 2 steps off that. And then I'm sewing that same piping with the same needle position all the way around my pocket. Because when I put my lining on in a minute, I want that one to be really close, not the one I'm doing now. So I've got my piping in, put the lining with the right sides facing down over the top, and then stitch from the same side where you can see your stitching line, again over it with a piping foot. And you want to use this time the position closest to the piping cord, so it's like really securely fitted in there. So all the way around. This is a whistle stop tour through patch pockets, bit fast maybe. And then cut back your seam allowances, turn and give that a jolly good press, and you can see that piping cord is so securely in there. Then I'm putting in a little pleat to make it a bit smaller, but you can gather the top or anything you like. Then I'm pinning my bias binding, which is ironed in half, and actually this is about 6 centimeters wide. Okay, so I'm sewing across there, making sure that I've got some standing on either side and it's sewn to the wrong side of my pocket. That's really important. Then I'm folding it over to the front of the pocket. But I'm also going to turn in my sides, and I'm cutting them back a bit so that I don't have as much in there. Turn it in and down and pin it. And that gives you a really nice edge. You could of course do a much wider bias strip and that way get a much bigger part at the top, and that's really fashionable. In fact, the dress I am wearing, I didn't show it when I was talking to you earlier, but I'm wearing exactly the same pocket. I was thinking that this morning. So pocket done. All you need to do is stitch that onto your coat or dress or trousers, and we're moving on to the girl's shirt pocket, and again that is fully lined, so the same as with a Megan pocket. Leave an opening gap, turn it inside out, and then fold down the top and iron it down. But to get both of those pockets exactly the same, put the other pocket over the top and then iron that down as well. And that way you get a perfect pocket, which then just needs sewing on. Now the one thing that's slightly different here, of course, is if I want to top stitch my pocket, and this is what we're doing now, you're stitching on the wrong side again from the crease all the way up, and I'm using a triple stitch here again, and then I'm coming all the way up to the other side and I'm ending at the crease. Then all I have to do is stitch all the way around it on the shirt. Now on the boys' shirt, there are a few more tricks to it because we're going to overlock around the edge. It's not going to be lined. That's a little bit girly, although you can do it. It is not necessary to overlock this pocket. You could just leave it, but I like it nice and clean look, so I do that. Now we're going to iron over the edge, and that's really, it's not a centimetre, I do slightly less, I always do that. And then where the snip is, we turn it over and we iron that down. If you have a fabric that's the same inside and out, of course you could have the tip to the outside, but now we're going to sew it from the outside. So in order to know where we're sewing, we're going to just iron in a little crease on both sides, and that tells us where we actually have to sew this along. So I'm going to put a few pins in. Maybe you want to mark the center, because sometimes when it's under the sewing machine you actually don't see where the center is all of a sudden. But if you can see those crease marks well enough, then line that up with your little red line on your sewing machine if you've got a foot like mine, and when you get to the center, move it around and then go back up to the other side. Now we're going to put a gather thread that will help us get this nice and round. So you can see I'm stitching directly on the edge of the overlocking. Now I'm also going to make a little template. It is not necessary. The ones of you with more experience won't have to do that, but if you are a beginner, then I would suggest that yes, make yourself a template. 1 centimeter seam allowance, fold it in half, and then we're cutting it a bit slimmer so that we can fit the pocket around it and iron along it. Fold in the top edge so you can see exactly where it needs to go. Turn over your pocket and then put your template on there. I tend to iron the sides first or not use a template at all, so that's up to you. I think I would just do one pocket like this and then you come up with your own way of how you want to do this. But the important part now is when you're taking the template back out, you can pull the gather thread, mind only from one side, and it pulls in that corner so it's nice and round. And that gives you a perfect edge. So you could just use the overlocking as your guide and just fold it over slightly more, or you can put the template in obviously and make sure that both pockets are exactly the same by just ironing around that one, and that gives you perfect finish. And I think for a beginner everyone will say, ooh, how did you do that? And you say, oh yeah, mum's the word. All I need to do now with my super duper pocket is put it on the shirt or wherever else it might go and stitch it all the way around. I hope you enjoyed the Sewing Thursday again, and we're back next week, and I really would like you to suggest some of the things that you would like to learn as well. So if you send me a picture to frocksandfrolicsflowergirls@gmail.com, the address is in the description of this video as well, or you can post it on the Frocks and Frolics Facebook page. Again, the link is underneath it. Then I will get right to it and I will do the pocket you need for your thing. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!